Let's start off with a huge fracture between the United States and Ukraine. This has been maybe part of the fallout from Russia and the United States meeting in Saudi Arabia, or maybe it's just Trump's rhetoric, because we all know President Trump is known for his rhetoric and his rhetoric being used as a negotiations tool. But let's face it, to a very uncanny world, we have some quotes here to take into consideration. And check out this reaction from former Vice President Trump. Here's the quotation mark that, quote, President Trump was known for saying. Mr. President, Ukraine did not start this war. Russia launched an unprovoked and brutal invasion, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. The road to peace must be built on the truth. And so this is the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. Realize there is a major fallout between both Pence and Trump, but that has nothing to do with basic truth or not. And here we have the former Vice President calling out the President of the United States. What does this mean? Let's take a closer look. Now, this comes as President Trump had already referred to Zelensky as a dictator. Remember, in the idea of how the world operates, in politics, a dictator is somebody who forces their way into power, or someone who assumes power, is put into power, and never leaves. Whatever this assumption is, we want to make sure that we know what the rhetoric really looks like, and maybe part of the genius of the American system and the genius of free speech is making sure all these conflicting opinions are out there so we can listen and think and come to our own conclusions about what's really going on in the world of politics. But this is really an incredibly important place for us to consider. Let's take a look at the next part of the story. The next part of the story deals with President Trump taking action once again. One more executive order. Now, you might be saying to yourself, how many executive orders is the President of the United States going to sign? That's a good question. But my guess is he started off his presidency with maybe a steamroller, maybe shock and awe, but most definitely he has an agenda in line. What's the next thing looking like? Another executive order that's designed to take away any kind of federal support for illegal immigrants. The fact is, whether it's food, whether it's shelter, whether it's anything, he does not want to see illegal immigrants supported by our taxpayer dollars. Now, some of you might say, how cruel, how mean, but there's another portion of our population saying, boy, where should that money be spent? And should our monies be spent on people who are breaking our laws and coming into our country? It's a great place to consider. And, you know, if you have thoughts, you have comments about this, please make sure you're making those below, because once again, the YouTube algorithm loves this. And secondly, I'd love to get feedback so I can respond to the best of my ability as to what's really going on here. The next story is really a Q&A, and this one comes right out of the Wall Street Journal. And this Q&A deals specifically with what impact will tariffs have on the U.S. auto industry. Now, you'll remember at one point in time, the United States was driven by the automobile industry. Whether it's Chrysler, whether it was General Motors, whether it was Ford, these auto industry manufacturers really drove the U.S. economy because, well, with that came steel, with that came the rubber that was produced here inside of the United States, and of course, even our own petroleum. And we're styling this back 100 years back to the Rockefeller period. But now, things have changed. And so maybe we can get a little bit more clarity on what's happening inside the auto industry and maybe some of their concerns. For instance, check this out. How often do we think about cars and semiconductors? Do those really play an integral part in the car? Well, the older cars, not so much. The newer cars with smart technologies, you better believe it is loaded with all kinds of things like semiconductors. How does that impact? Well, the automobile industry is so concerned that they are actually lobbying the president about what the impact is going to be on their bottom line. And of course, maybe the prices we're paying on vehicles. I don't know about you, but I personally don't drive new cars. I've never even bought a new car. So I'm always buying something that's older, and part of my saving strategy is I don't buy new cars because I do not want to pay that upfront price and have my car depreciate, bam, just like that when I dry it off the lot. Many of you have a different approach, and I understand that, and I don't judge that whatsoever. I'm just saying what's worked for Brian so far. But we'll follow up more about this story. In more news, FBI director, or soon-to-be director, or maybe we can say Kash Patel is currently up for Senate thumbs up or thumbs down on the appointment to become FBI director, but a couple of red flags have been raised, and this must not be anything that bothers Donald Trump nor his administration, but I'm just here to say that this is a red flag that is getting a few more people raising their eyebrows. As fate would have it, Kash Patel has some investments in a Chinese company called Shein, and this could make him a couple $100 million. If this makes Kash Patel a ton of money, the big question is, do you have any real relationships with the Chinese? And secondly, what is your relationship with the Chinese investment community? Finally, will those relationships have a tendency to cloud your judgment nor cloud your loyalty inside of the FBI? Me personally, I don't know if there is any kind of a collusion there, what have you, but what I would have you do is leave your comments below, and maybe you're not worried about it. I know if this is Donald Trump's guy, chances are that it's been thoroughly vetted, and maybe this is just the media going on and making a sensationalized version of this story to sell more newspapers. Who knows? But you know the world that we're living in right now, and this could be just another one of those ploys. But we'll continue to follow up on this story. In our fourth story, we're taking a look at the basic idea of government waste and identifying what government waste looks like. Government waste, particularly at the federal level where most of the spending takes place, many of the people who are aware of the waste and aware of how the different systems between agencies might not completely interface could be causing part of the problem. And if there's a way to take those different, inability to cooperate between agencies, whether it's their software, whether it's their personnel, whether it's their different platforms they're using, maybe it's some of their different procedures, we know that there's an ongoing issue with government spending. The big point is not necessarily the fact that there is government waste, but really, what is the best methodology to deal with that waste, that overspending? And maybe part of what the DOGE is really about is identifying this spending and hopefully identifying best methods to eliminating it. And we're not talking about just firing people or just trying to eliminate agencies as much as what waste can be cut. That would be my approach. I don't have all the answers, and I'm clearly not a Washington bureaucrat nor somebody who makes decisions in Washington, D.C., but I do like us to explore these ideas because, once again, what do we want to become? We want to become informed Americans, informed voters, and just raise our awareness as to what are some of the other dynamics going on inside of our news cycle and inside of our government. Final story deals with, yes, you guessed it, Chairman Powell and interest rates. Stay tuned. If there's one thing that maybe President Trump would like to have a little bit more say about, it would be interest rates. And trust me, if the president had his way, he would have lower interest rates to maybe grease the wheels of our economy. But that's not the job of the president. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Powell, actually is appointed by various members of the Federal Reserves, and he cannot be interfered with by the President of the United States. He is independent of the president. And as a result, being in charge of the economy, Powell is being very, very thoughtful about future interest rate cuts, what those might look like, and equally as important, when, if ever, to lower the interest rates or possibly raise the interest rates. He's keenly aware of things like the Consumer Price Index, which really affects everyday spending for Americans. Like, seriously, have you gone to the grocery store and bought eggs lately? I have, and I realize there's a few different components to it, but the grocery bill in of itself has gotten super expensive. And most of us, myself included, feel the pain of going to the grocery store. So we continue to follow what's going to happen here with the economy. We don't expect things to work overnight. While there is an aggressive agenda by this administration, we also need to be super aware that this is a little bit more of a wait and see approach when it comes to Powell. And of course, the rest of us may be a little bit less patiently waiting, trying to figure out what's going to happen here next and hoping we see some kind of a decline in prices here, because let's face it, folks, it's expensive out there. Hey, my name is Brian. Make sure you're subscribing and following this channel so news can be delivered right to your inbox. Leave comments below, and finally, do me a favor, hit that like button, because YouTube loves the algorithm button when it's punched. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you're interested, go ahead and check out some of the former episodes. Hit that as part of our loop, and I will check out with you and talk to you tomorrow. Same time, same place.